Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Attack Signal Intelligence, Breaking Out of the Spiral of More, sponsored by Vectra Networks. My name is Mary Lynn Gollier of SANS. Today's featured speakers are Matt Bromley, SANS analyst, and Kevin Kennedy, Senior Vice President of Products at Vectra. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the Q&A window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Great, thanks, Mary. Matt, it's good to see you again. This is
hey, Kevin, likewise.
So really looking forward to the conversation, and thank you all for joining. You know, I spend a lot of time with practitioners out in our customer base, and these are mainly people in security operations, security engineering. And one of the things that I've heard a lot of recently is that people are struggling with the more of security, and people come in with a ton of passion into this space, and the landscape now and this constant challenge of more is burning people out, and it's getting to the point where it's not just risking the outcomes for companies, but it's actually creating a challenge with personal well-being, and so that's what we wanted to talk about today and have a conversation, Matt, around is what's going on and what are the causes, and how do we break out of it and really bring people back to the place where security can be fun, exciting, and companies can get the right outcomes again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to kind of add on what Kevin's saying, first off, if this is something like, as he's describing this problem, if this is something that you're like, wow, that sounds really familiar, or look to your left or look to your right, you might know someone who suffers from the spiral of more, if you will. But the other thing that I want to make sure that we kind of mention and talk about here is, as we go through this, and Kevin and I are going to be really having a discussion back and forth about this, but for everyone who's kind of watching this too, I wanted you to really put into perspective, it's kind of like the journey of what you've been through as either a security analyst or someone in the security space. Kevin, when I hear you talking about returning to making security fun again, and I won't say the phrase make security fun again, but we all know the inspiration there. But I'll just simply say, think back to some of those times where you weren't necessarily drowning in alerts or analysis paralysis or too much or anything like that. And let's try to think about ways to get back to those previous states. The other thing I want to add on really quick, just really quick housekeeping for the webcast here, just so everyone knows, the Q&A window is open here on Zoom, and Kevin and I are going to be keeping an active eye on it as well. So as we're going through and having this conversation today, if there's something that you agree with, or even better yet, disagree with, Kevin's a huge fan for opposition. So if we can get any sort of opinions coming up here, we'd love to get the audience as interactive as we possibly can be. I can't bring you on camera, unfortunately, but you can definitely submit your questions that way if you want to. But yeah, with that said, Kevin, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let's get it going. Yeah,
great. So I think what we've seen as the spiral of more, the attack, it starts kind of with the attack surface expanding. And so it used to be the simple old world of you have your data centers, you have some endpoints interacting with those, and it really has dramatically expanded. Everyone knows this now. We just had our customer advisory board last week. Every single one of those organizations is multi-cloud. They typically have hundreds of SaaS applications that they're responsible for, even though they don't always know about all of them. They still have the data centers. They will for a long time, probably forever. They have the endpoints, and now there's identity that's sitting out there as the gateway into it all, and typically exposed to the internet. And there's constant vulnerabilities against all of that stuff. And so it's really challenging from complexity of attack surface. And then you also have the fact that it's not even more sophisticated attackers necessarily. It's that techniques that used to be reserved to sophisticated attackers are now automated in tools where anyone can use them. And so it's really easy against this massive attack surface and all the tooling for different adversaries to come and attack for different reasons, whether it's espionage or crime or whatnot. So this is a landscape I think everyone knows about that. And so how do we then respond? Well, more tools. So all of these, like you got 3 clouds, you have cloud native tools, you have posture management, you have different detection capabilities, you have more acronyms than you can shake a stick at. And you then got to try to turn these all together or integrate these all together to create something that's actually a reasonable signal. And that's a real challenge. Most organizations never get there. There's a whole category just aimed at doing that, but most organizations don't get there. And so then, to the analysts goes, you got more rules to write. You've got more alerts flying at you from all these different things that all have different workflows. You got to tune them. Like this is a spiral that keeps going. And at the center of it is the fact that the defenders are feeling super burnt out. And this is an IBM security stat. The 67% are experiencing stress or anxiety. Matt, I think there was some research that came out with SANS, and I think it was Devo was the vendor behind it, that talked about some really similar trends. What are you hearing? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to, there was the Devo SOC performance report or something like that, I think, which was the pain of SOC staffers was rated at a 6 through 9 out of 10 and that kind of stuff. So it's showing, I think what I don't know, either a lot of us are feeling. I feel like this is a thing that either a lot of folks are feeling and there's just not really a name put on top of it, or there's a name put on it and it's just a problem that we're just kind of hoping out. I'm not sure will fade away. Obviously, it won't be until we obviously start to make some changes. But yeah, that brings up that, it's not a carefree job, if you will, number one. But we should be looking for ways, I think, to make it a little more less dissatisfying, if you will, right? Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of reward in securing an organization and stuff like that. But the problem is, like, it gets to that point where it gets too overburdensome, if you will, too much to have to deal with. And I think it's, there's studies on the mental health side of things. There's studies on like the physical side of things and the lifestyle and the work-life balance and all that kind of stuff. But I think the big one is kind of that pain measurement, number one, which again, 6 to 9 out of 10, which is just absolutely huge. And then there's also the issue of like attracting and then retaining that talent as well. So looking at that exact same survey, I think 55% say that they've considered walking away from their jobs due to the pressure that they feel. So we've got this ongoing issue of like, we need to build a core security team that understands the niches of the environment and understands the complexities and everything like that, but we can't hang on to people. But to Kevin's point, our attack surface keeps getting bigger, but we can't hang on to people. We've got to write more rules and detections, but we can't hang on to people. But our developers are doing X, Y, Z, but we can't hang on to people. Notice the trend here, the same thing that's happening. So I think there's, a really important discussion, which we're obviously having, but I think there's also like, keep track of yourselves, especially those of you either working in or know folks who are working on these teams and that kind of stuff. Keep track of yourselves and don't shy away from explaining or understanding the complexities that have increased. Kevin, I gotta give you a huge hats off, because you talked about defenders struggling and you didn't put the word pandemic on this slide, which is great. And I'm trying my best to move past this discussion. And I think all of us should, not move past it like it never occurred, but we have to account for the past 3 years as a security analyst has been vastly different than what you were probably promised as a job 5 years ago. And that needs to be considered and brought in. And then Kevin, you brought up something else that I wanted to just kind of stress for folks, just in case we've got anyone watching who, maybe hasn't seen this side of it, or maybe has only seen the past couple of years. You talked about, and tell me if I'm wrong on this one here, you talked about threats that used to be kind of reserved for more sophisticated actors now being kind of wildly accessible. And, one of the things I want to maybe draw on that point or highlight for some of our attendees here is there was a day in you know, in attacks, in cyber intrusions, if you will, where like 0 days and, you know, really advanced exploits and that kind of stuff were like these, I'm not going to call them treasures, but they were like these things that you found as part of complex incident responses. And they were, you know, these things that you read about in these reports, and you're like, wow, that was slick. Like that was dangerous, but that was slick. And there was like a technical appreciation of it now. And I think there is still some of that. But what's happened is now it's become, oh, XYZ VPN appliance has a vulnerability, right? There's 17 POCs on GitHub. There's documentation on how to connect this thing to mass scan, to a phishing campaign, to all this kind of stuff. And now you have someone who literally has a free Friday night and they're able to compromise 1,000 devices and that kind of stuff. And it has become wildly more opportunistic than I think it used to be. And I think that's something that we, and maybe I'm speaking to those defenders with like 5+ years of experience here. I think that's something else that we all need to recognize, is that the landscape has changed, you know, and that's not to give a nod to anything else that San says, but the threats that we're facing have totally changed. And I'll get off this digression in just a moment, but I'll add one more point to this, right? Let's say that you had kind of structured your, you know, your battle plans or your incident response plans or whatever, right? And I use this analogy for some folks that I talk to, but, you know, let's say you're directing traffic, Kevin. You've been directing traffic for 10 years, right? You're a crossing guard or whatever. And for 10 years, you've only seen sedans. All right. So you're used to the height of cars, right? You're used to being able to look over them if you're tall enough. Like your whole environment is built around the things that you normally see. Then you come into work one day and the road's full of monster trucks. And it's just kind of like, whoa, hold on. No one in the world should feel like, you know, personally responsible or upset or even ashamed that they're lost or stuck in a situation like that. And I think that's what this slide really speaks to. And I think that's kind of what the point that Kevin's making for everyone here. The numbers of folks who are like, I'm stuck. What happened, right? We weren't prepared for this. We weren't built for this, is exactly what he's honing in on, is like, I wasn't ready for that. You know, I wasn't ready for this to come down the road.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. And then the idea that a brand new vulnerability gets dropped into a toolkit overnight, and you can now have people with very minimal skills attacking at scale. And it's not just about the POC. Now you're inside, and things that used to be hard around how you do domain attacks, going after domain admin, and like all of that tooling is automated. So you have to know how the pieces fit together, but it's like click a button, run a command, and bam, you've got the answer. And that's coming to the cloud as well with frameworks like Paku. It's a bit further behind on the cloud side, but that's coming as well. And it just changes the game. And when you have people with relatively low skills who can do things that used to be reserved for nation states.
Yes, 100%. And it's I don't know, Kevin, you made me think. You brought up a good memory now. I mean, I remember the very first time I learned about like compromising it, like stealing the entire Active Directory domain database, the NTDS.dit. First time I learned about that, I was like, man, that's such a slick, like, what a crazy attack vector it is to walk off with the whole thing. And now it's literally like one button, replicate, done, you're out. And I'm like, oh man, the easy button got too easy.
Changes the game.
Yeah.
So you know, I think there's this challenge for all of the defenders, and then you know, you look at what the outcome is from the organizational standpoint, and it's shocking. The what you want is to understand, hey, and feel confident we're not compromised right now, or that if you are, you know and can do something about it. And I found we did some research, that the stat on the left, but like nearly 3/4 of the leaders thought they might be breached but didn't know it. And so like it's really, that's a horrible outcome when you're kind of sifting through all this more. You're spending more. So many organizations have been spending more, and I think that's going to likely taper or stop next year in terms of growth in budgets. But what's the outcome? There's still this huge unknown, and more of it is coming from cloud and credentials, which is where most of the teams that I speak with feel the least confidence in their visibility and awareness. And so this is, this is not the situation that we want to be in. We're burning people out, and we're not solving the core problem of understanding from a security perspective whether there's an active compromise somewhere in our environment right now. We've got to fix this.
Yes, 100%. These stats are too high. These stats are too darn high. No, sorry, meme references here. Think about that though, man. 3/4 of leaders think that they're breached, but don't know it. I mean, given the how should I phrase this correctly? Given the recent turmoil, or the recent alleged turmoil that the CISO position has been put into due to recent court decisions and that kind of stuff, what a heavy weight to have to walk around on your shoulders, to have to carry around your neck, is to be part of that 3/4 that says, you know what? Yeah, we probably are, but I got, I don't have the ability to see it or to determine it or figure it out, right? Because there's just too much. So it's a heavy stat, Kevin. It's a real tough one. And then, that same individual has to turn around and watch business operation plans that are like, hey, we're moving more out to the cloud, or we're moving more out to this third-party service, or we're moving more out, or developers just spun up all this new stuff. The other thing that comes to mind for me right now is when I look at stats and we have topics like this, for those of you watching here, if you're in that, I understand that everyone's always at risk, if you will, but I really start to think about like retail workers, hospitality workers, stuff like that, where the seasonal trends start to pick up and everything like that. I mean, it's an old example, but it still works out well. Target was hit around Black Friday because that's when they knew what was going to happen. For those of you in those like seasonal positions, or those areas where you've got predictable ups and downs in terms of volume and cash flow and stuff like that, it can be a huge weight to have to add on to, hey, not only do I think we're breached, but I don't know it. Not only is my staff likely burned out, not only am I likely short staffed, but yeah, we're about to go through the busiest time of the year as well. So again, I think Kevin and I are doing a very good job of reiterating and reforming to everyone that this massive unknown side of things is not just a stat that we can work through with a clever script or something like that. Kevin, it's more of those, this is a serious issue. This is a big mental tax on the industry, if you will. Yes.
And I mean, this is, it also means like we built a lot of strong approaches in the past, and then there's areas where security is not working. When you look at this, something that's not working. So the definition of insanity, we need to change. We need to change the way that we're thinking about this and approaching it if we're going to solve it, and get people back to the right space from a personal development, personal happiness, personal well-being, and get the right outcomes for companies who are investing into their security programs. Mm-hmm. So, interesting, just as a bring people in thought exercise. So, how do we start breaking out of this? I'll start with a question, which is, you're choosing a new tool, and you've carefully thought through your threat models, the adversaries who are coming after you. You've developed arbitrary number 23 tests that are gonna represent that threat model and those adversaries, and you run them against 3 of the systems or tools that you have as options. One of them finds 10, one finds 15, one finds 20. If you're making the choice, which one of these do you choose?
So I'm letting you
Go for it. We thought about doing a poll, but we ended not. Anyone want to chime in with their choice?
Let's see. I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A window just to see if anything comes up. Oh, here we go. Someone said 15. Oh. So far, we've had 1 vote for 15.
So someone going for the middle. You don't want to go high. You don't want to go low. You want to go for the middle. So
hey, Kevin, just while our audience is thinking about that, is this 10 out of 23, 15 out of 23, or 20 out of 23? Like,
Yeah.
that's my ratio? Okay.
Call it roughly, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Do you pass did you find those tests? Do you detect those tests? So let's add in the other piece of this, which is, I think as there's always a question of both coverage and noise, and those two go to accuracy. So if we then add it in, well, the one that detected 20 also generated 1,000 alerts. The one that detected 10 only gave 10 alerts. Listen, I think no matter what, you have to demand that whatever you choose detects the things you care about, and is able to find threats.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. But there is often this trade-off and this balance. And whether it's like, heck, you can look at the testing industry for security products. You can go back to NSS labs and that even more modern approaches like MITRE, and I think that's a huge step forward in the testing that they're doing. It only looks at what is detected. It doesn't look at the noise and the false positives and the more that it generates for security teams. And this is a real problem, because it's, you mentioned the target attack. There's an interesting narrative in the target attack when that first happened, and this is what, 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago, like a long time. One of the first narratives was there was an alert there and the security team missed it. It's their fault, right? But the extra fact was, by the way, there were thousands or tens of thousands of alerts coming from that same product every single day. Now whose fault is it? Right.
Yeah.
And this is like, if you're generating a sea of unusable noise in order to chase coverage, I'll let you in on a little secret, which is it's really easy to get coverage if you don't care about noise. So think about something like you're interested in attacks that are living off the land. They're using PSExec, PowerShell, WMI to move around networks. Flag every single RPC call, every single PowerShell invocation, and man, you're going to detect anything that the adversary does. But you're also going to catch every administrator doing their job, and you're going to be buried in a sea of noise. So it's trivial to actually detect things. It's much harder to detect with accuracy, and give a signal that is actually usable. And this is I think one of the fundamental challenges that drives or philosophies that drives the Moore spiral, is the incentive to get coverage at all costs ends up leaving this as a defender problem. And sitting in your shoes, I would demand more of vendors than giving you a noise cannon in order to chase coverage.
Yeah, Kevin, I think, by the way, the individual who said 15% responded back and said, I will work with 15% versus 2%. And, I like that the sliding scale here goes from 100% to 15% to 2%. But I think, I love that quote, right? I love what you said about coverage and visibility. And if you don't care about noise, it's super easy. But I think the other takeaway, the other thing that I think about when I hear this, and I'm hoping this will resonate with some of our attendees here as well today, is you think about, oh, just send me all the things. I'll figure out how to sort through it. You know what I mean? And it's kind of one of those, and I've seen this before many of times, right? I've seen folks choosing which API to subscribe to and stuff. And it's you have the full raw stream, and it's everything. And even vendors are not vendors, but a cloud provider, for example, is hey, this is extremely verbose, just so you know, because we're doing multiple millisecond checks on things and we're going to log all of it. And someone's like, cool, send me everything, because you never know where the attack's going to live. Right. And we've done this wonderful job of imagining to ourselves that we need all the telemetry, because the attacks are always going to be sneaky and hidden. And as a defender team, we're going to have time to figure out super advanced user behavioral analytics that takes a look at the millisecond differences between clicks and API calls and things like that, we're going to detect all the attacks that come through. And I think what happens is it's really easy, you know, there's that phrase, getting ahead of your skis and that kind of stuff. It's really easy as a defense team to think, just bring me all the things. But I want to add in some of the other complexities that we talked about a little bit earlier on, right? What's your staffing look like? What's the morale of the team look like right now? These percentages, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I think these percentages do a really good, or they set a really good barometer for anyone watching this here right now. I want you all to think about this the other way. Just look at the orange bars at the bottom. To me, they're orange. Hopefully they are for you too. But look at the orange bars at the bottom here. Let's just start there, right? How do those numbers stack up against what you've got in your organization right now? I'm telling you, Kevin, I don't know if you're going to agree with me on this one, but I'm telling you, most organizations are probably way above a lot of these numbers.
Yeah.
Way above.
This is one tool. They've probably
Exactly.
got tools, so.
Yeah. So let's apply the same math, right? Take your daily alert volume and let's just imagine you ran that test. And if your alert volume's in the thousands, tens of thousands, whatever it is, you need to find 23, right? The goal is 23. We didn't even hit 100% on the test here, but the goal is for your SOC team to find all 23. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's a really, really tough task if I don't add on any other complexities. And then I do, and I say, hey, so-and-so's out sick. So-and-so, you don't have a manager, you don't have a team lead. We're responding to that same incident from 9 months ago that we never cleaned up and we weren't able to get to. Oh, and by the way, you know, we also have to, we're missing 4 log sets from this new third-party integration we just set up and stuff like that. And anyways, I won't continue to belabor the point, but I'll just add here. I love little barometers like this because I think they give you, our attendees, as teams, as security analysts, a chance to step back and be like, how effective is this plan that we put into place? This send us all the things, this massive kitchen sink approach. It doesn't really seem to be that effective for everyone that's out there. And I think that's what, you know, when Kevin keeps emphasizing, we need to change, we need to change, we need to change. The change we're talking about here is in volume. And I think it also comes down to our ability to accept, Kevin, you've said this multiple times, demand better of your vendors. I think that that's the other thing that we as a security industry need to not necessarily be afraid to do as well. If you're getting too many alerts and your team can't keep up with stuff, talk to your vendor, lower the volume, find ways to lower the volume. And, you know, I've had plenty of organizations sit down with their vendors and say, my team needs to be more efficient and you're not enabling that. Cool. What are we here for? What are we doing? You know, so I'm not going to drop mic on that, but I'm just going to say, use numbers like this, use little exercises like this as a team to push forward that idea of like, can we actually find needles in haystacks over here? Or are we just dreaming that we could have?
Yeah. And I think that's really like this approach to, and we do see a lot of focus on the coverage number and ignore the alert volume, and that is a core issue. Like, of course you need coverage. Of course you need coverage for the things that you care about, and you should push your vendors for that too. But Matt, you said this. It's not just, if you think the number of detections is signal, if that's what's gonna save you, it's not. It's just going to, it's actually going to allow the vendor to pass the buck to you. Mm-hmm. And basically, I mean, we were talking to our customers about this last week, and you know, talking about this scenario of, okay, if what no one wants happens and they end up breached, would they rather have no alert or the alert buried in a stream of other stuff? And it's like, the worst possible situation is you have this massive pile of alerts and somewhere there is the one that mattered, because then it's your fault. And that is, I think, the way that a lot of the industry vendors have designed products with that in mind. No, but it's not our fault. We've had, you know, we're not a perfect vendor. We've had internal struggles with this as we've moved more and more to say, how do we amplify the signal? We have to make choices about what we're putting in front of users. That's owning and taking accountability for the outcome and for the efficacy of our signal, not just that somewhere in there was an alert, And that's hard because you've got to be right. If you say these are the things you should go look at because these are the most important, we're putting all of our smarts around this, it's got to be right, because if you miss, it's your fault, right? But that's the way to break out of the spiral of more, is to really focus not just on the detections and the coverage, but what's the accuracy? How effective is this signal? How actionable is this signal? Are you actually able to use it to see the thing early and stop it before it becomes the breach event? And that will help both with the security outcomes for companies, but at least as important, it's going to help the well-being of defenders and get back to a happier space. And that's the only way. You talked about people leaving and people like creating, there's never enough people. This mentality of more has, I would argue, has amplified or even created the skill gap, where there's not enough people. Because who wants to join this, and are people in it, staying in it? This can go a long way, I'd argue, to reversing that and turning it into a positive spiral that makes people's lives better and security outcomes better.
Agreed. I think it's such an important understanding, and it's also it's an honest admission, right? It's an honest admission that we've got to make, that we've got to start asking of the folks who bring it into our environment. And that's not to, Kevin, I know you're not throwing shade to anyone specific. I won't. I will do the same and not throw specific shade either. But I think, maybe my biggest takeaway for everyone so far from this is not only to recognize this issue, but also demand more and demand better of the folks that provide you your signal and provide you your intelligence and your environment and stuff. If your team's not being effective with what you're being given, call that out and ask for either a way to get better or a way to be more empowered or something like that. Please don't let, we have a massive SIM with thousands of alerts per minute. That's thousands of signals that come in per minute, and we can see everything. And now we need to go hire a detection engineering team. And now we need to go do this. And now we need to go do that. I'll be honest with you. I've been to plenty of organizations where the security team, I don't want to say they're too big. That's not the case, but I would say there's a lot of overlap. I think the Venn diagram between what a security team should be doing and what a vendor should be providing to you is sometimes a lot closer or a lot more of a circle than folks realize. And maybe that's the best way to frame it is, if you've got those issues, or you're seeing those problems, and I see this all the time. I see plenty of times organizations are just like, oh yeah, such and such doesn't work or doesn't give us what we need, so we're going to rotate, we're going to switch. And then what I see is a hop between POCs every year, and then there's breaches in between, and it's always like, well, how did this happen? We have the latest this, latest that, blah blah. It's like, because your team's not moving towards a state of actually being enabled and empowered. You're just hopping between what you think might be better, but it's kind of like changing cars. You know what I mean? The point of a car is to get you from point A to point B. Is the car doing what I need it to do most efficiently? So in any event, I'm gonna let you keep going through this, Kevin, because I know you've got some insight into like how this can be better or things we can do to make it better.
Yeah, and I think so. So this has been we've been doing this for 10 years. We started on the network side, but have expanded, and so really the challenge that our customers have asked us to address is this broad attack surface. So we natively do identity, SaaS, public cloud network, and then plug in with all the leading endpoints to bring that signal in. But we've really been focused, and we're increasing our investment now into the clarity. So the way that we've seen this play out, coverage. Of course, you need coverage. You need to be able to get the data that reflects all of these attack surfaces. You have to have ways to detect things you care about. But we've had coverage for a long time. We've had coverage from things like, on the network side, IDS for years. The SIM has a lot of the logs for identity and SaaS applications and public cloud. So there's often coverage, and you mentioned detection engineering teams writing rules and sims, and like that's there. You have those capabilities. There's also at the end, you have to be able to do something about it. So just detecting things is not enough. You have to be able to figure out exactly what they mean, what you need to do, and respond at speed. And so there's been a lot of focus on the automation. And there's SOAR platforms, there's people who build their own, all around how you investigate, respond at speed to act. But the thing that's missing in the spiral of more is what bridges those, which is the clarity. You have to be able to turn the data about what's happening at the attack surface into a signal that you can use to control and do something with. And so that's really what we've been very heavily focused on. And I'll just share a few of the observations of how we're approaching it. And I'm trying to stay away from like, this isn't a vendor pitch. I'm trying to stay to principles versus what specifics we've done. We do, you will hear in this a lot AI. I know AI is a buzzword, and the reality is it's a tool. It helps to solve a problem. It's how you use it that matters. It is critical to solving this problem well, but you've got to use it in the right way with the right approaches. So, it does start with the way that you detect things that are relevant to attack methods. And there are some approaches that say, hey, Matt, you mentioned this, throw all the data at us, we'll figure out what matters. And we've looked at this, and if you don't have the signal, obviously you can't amplify anything in the way that you prioritize and sort. But if you have also a tremendous amount of just noisy signal, you're not going to make sense out of it either. So you need a foundation that is quality, and the way that we have approached this is really to focus on attacker methods, and this has worked pretty well. We've strayed away from it a few times. We have 1,000 customers. We've done this for 10 years. We have a lot of feedback. We've done things that worked really well. We've done things that haven't worked and have forced us to course correct. And what we've come up with is really this approach. So if you think about what is your starting point, it's security. So even if you're using AI, you got to start with security. And so we've focused in on the methods that are used, and you can think of MITRE ATT&CK for that. Then what are the countermeasures? How do you look for that in an environment which is aligned with MITRE DEFEND? And then you can use the ML and the right tool in the toolkit to pick it up. But that actually gives you a pretty solid and accurate signal that's really thinking like the attacker does in terms of generating a useful foundation. So that's the starting point. Matt, I don't know if there's anything from especially you said, hey, I'll push back and you like confrontation. I know AI is a buzzword.
Yeah.
And anything as you think in audience head, challenge me on this. Is there anything that you'd push back on or ask for clarity around?
Well, here's my thing about this, Kevin. I think, you said buzzword, and I think it's very easy. Here's the conundrum, right? It's very easy for folks in security to hear a term or a buzzword, see that it doesn't work in its infancy, and then spend the next 15 years saying that something sucks, and I tend to have to also shy away from that. Now, that's not to say that everything is done, that every AI is correctly and is done successful and things like that. But I think the point that I want to make about what Kevin's stressing here is, if you're hanging on to the dislike of buzzwords from years ago and your team is suffering or you're running into these issues that we spent the first half of this talking about and things like that, it might be worth a second look at those technologies. I don't think in what you're saying, Kevin, I don't think AI is any more this sort of buzzword that no one does correctly or anything like that, if you will. I think technology has now gotten to a point, and I say technology, let's be clear, like algorithms have developed, they've observed enough attacker activity by now. We've got enough of a template to be able to say, this is good, this is bad, so on and so forth. Excuse me. I think that if you've got a team that's hurting or you need ways to trim down some of this noise, I would look at every tech option that I've got out there, and I would continue to stress to see, do any of these actually work for us? So I don't think there's any pushback. In fact, I'd encourage more harnessing or more kind of dipping your toe into the water, if you will. Because I'm going to tell you all right now, I'm just going to say this statement flat out. I'm not calling anyone out in particular. But if you're going to sit there and tell me that AI and ML and all these other approaches don't work, and your method of detection is to pump CSVs of MD5s into a tool somewhere, I'm sorry, you've really missed the boat on ways to make things more efficient for yourself. And again, it's another opportunity to go out and say, here's what I'm looking for. Can anyone help me get there? You know, so things like that. In any event, that's kind of where I leave it at.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I would argue it's impossible from a practical standpoint to detect the things that need to be detected without using AI. That being said, there's a whole bunch of, it's a tool, and it can be used well or it can be used poorly, and that's where, you know, it's hard to our CMO is actually saying, hey, can we boil down to exactly what's different about ours so that everyone understands? It's like, you know, the reality is there's a bit of the proof is in the pudding, especially in a space is noisy. But we really have found, you know, you go and you look for the abnormal and you're going to create a lot of noise. You look for what's different and you're going to generate a lot of noise. It really does come down to thinking like the attacker, starting with the method from a security research standpoint, and then building a really good algorithm. So that's been the foundation. But even that has not been enough. It's probably historically where we spent 80% of our time and effort in application of AI. But it then requires building on top of that, because when you're finding methods, you are going to find things that are still not particularly relevant. A lot of them will be relevant, but you're still going to have more noise than you want. More needs to be done to figure out of those things which are actually malicious, which have very high probability of being malicious, which means really learning more about the environment that you're operating in, and using your conceptually, it's another layer of AI that's running on top of the detections that learns more about the environment and can, as well as more global attack profiles. What do you mentioned, Matt, that we have enough attacks now, and the stuff is in enough environments and has seen enough stuff that we can actually say, what does an attack, what does a ransomware attack look like as it progresses? Are there indicators that we can pull out? There's stuff that we know about threat landscapes and emerging campaigns that can also feed in. So it's both learning what's going on in the environment and what are the patterns in history, but also what's going on in a global standpoint. And that can then bring more about what's actually malicious out of these methods that were detected. And then the last piece is, okay, so if we know, we see methods, we have a good indication of what's malicious, and these are kind of correlated to accounts and hosts. What's important to you from your threat model perspective? And you know, I often hear, hey, if there's some threat running around on the guest Wi-Fi, if there is guest Wi-Fi anymore, I don't care that much about that. It's got to be a really bad thing. But if there's something on my domain controller, I want to know right now. My tolerance for noise on the domain controller is a lot more, because the impact is so much higher. And so there also has to be, in doing the prioritization, you need awareness of that. And so there's ways to learn that, roles, privilege that's observed, and there's ways to have that fed in. So again, kind of that blend of human and AI that creates a really good outcome that can zero in on what matters to you right now, what's urgent for you to go address right now, and what isn't. Which is like, you always got to say what you're not going to do. And so if you can build this up and say, here's the 5 things to go focus on, there might be other activity, it's not urgent. And let the system keep watching. This is how we call this attack signal intelligence. But how you get clarity around what's going on. These are some key principles to it.
I have nothing but agreement in hearing this. And I think your example of kind of a ransomware breach is a perfect example of, again, just understanding that, it's, there's a huge difference. And this is context becomes an important keyword here as well, when it comes to kind of empowerment and enablement, but also when it comes to finding ways to make a lot of this more efficient. Lean on your tools to help get you there, and use what a tool can tell you about your environment to help establish priority and urgency and things like that. And find little ways to cut that noise volume down. And let the tools help you. And I think, without getting too repetitive, as I keep walking through this, but I keep leaning back on, hopefully everyone's noticed, I've said the word, let your tools help you about 4 times now as I list these examples out. The thing I'm trying to lay out here is, I truly feel that technology is at a point, and products are at a point, where they can actually help make up a lot of this lost ground. They can help solve a lot of these problems here. And that's kind of the thing that I want to draw everyone's attention to, is lean on those tools, lean on those vendors. Please do not sit back and say, well, this vendor sends me 20,000 alerts a day or 20,000 signals an hour or whatever it is, and it's my team's job to sift through it. No, it's your team's job to get what you expect out of that vendor. That's it. If you signed up for a vendor, now don't get me wrong, if you signed up for a vendor and you were like, I want all the things all the time, 24/7, that's what I'm paying for, cool. Then you're getting exactly what you paid for. But if someone came to you and was like, we've got, super advanced threat detection that enables your team to do this, this, and that, we cover all these different products, we do this and we do that, and you're not getting what you thought you'd get out of it, folks, call them out and say, hey, I need the technology to help bridge this gap here and bridge this problem. And then here's where I'm going with this. I look at that last box on the right-hand side that Kevin's got called out here. Everyone, that's my checklist. Like, if I'm on a team that's just hurting, if I'm on a team that needs people, we've got too much, we're drowning, whatever the issue may be that we outlined earlier, that's my checklist. Those are the things that I am going to a vendor, I'm going to my various security vendors, and I'm saying, hey, here's what I need my team to be able to do. Where do you fit in the box here? How do those pieces connect? How do I make it happen? And let's do it if you say you can. If you don't, guess what? This is what my team needs. Next call. This is what my team needs. How do you fit in? How, you know what I mean? So on and so forth. It's a repeatable playbook until you get to where your team needs to be. The focus should be your team needs, not what a vendor promises they can do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's like, it's your right to demand this. You are the customer. But more importantly, this is what is required to break out of the spiral of more. It is clarity, right? And we all know that intuitively. That's often not what's asked for. And so really getting clear about clarity, but really being clear in your minds about what your requirements are, and focusing not just on the detection count and the coverage, but how you get clarity out of something. Demand it when you're choosing, demand it after you've implemented. It is about outcomes. We as vendors owe you outcomes, not just tools and technology. We owe you outcomes. And so push us on that.
Exactly. Could not agree more. And
then just the last piece here is as we wrap is, there's a lot of discussion about how AI fits with humans, with people, and really the role that we see is right now, like there may be a future world where all of the response and all of that happens through AI. Maybe right now, the state of the art is being able to give a team really good signal and then empowering them to do the right thing with that signal to stop threats. And so this is very much a partnership between capabilities on the AI side and the attack signal intelligence and human intelligence, and getting that interface right, making that work efficiently. That is really key to the outcomes. And so it's not just about creating the signal, it's about then plugging that into all the right workflows, making it usable, making the right investigation workflows, ticketing systems, tool integrations, all of that work, so that teams can be effective with it. We feel really strongly about taking that step to give intelligence or generate it with the AI, but then really arm and empower teams to do something with it. So with that, Matt, I'm looking, any additional questions that have come in? I know we've addressed a few as we've gone.
Nothing that we haven't already addressed, or things that I knew were kind of coming down the line. So no, nothing new came in. We're actually at a perfect, kind of everyone seems to be happy point. But I'll say, hey, over the next 30, 45 seconds, as Kevin and I close out and stuff, if anyone does have a question, feel free to throw it in there and we'll happily tackle it. But I just want to reiterate, and maybe it's more of a call to action for everyone out here as well. I would really, hope that folks walk away from a webcast like this and they go back and really think about the types of problems, the types of things that their teams are seeing. And I'm not talking about, obviously like staffing being an issue and things like that, but I want to look at kind of the mental side of what teams are going through, the overload of alerts, the anxiety that comes out of it, the stress, the constant growing of the attack surface and things like that. And then I want you all as an analyst, as a manager, as a stakeholder, as an exec, as a VP or whatever, I want you to step back and just simply say, is my team equipped with the best possible tooling out there? Buzzwords aside, is my team equipped with the best tooling out there? What is it? Hey team, what is it you all actually need? What would make life easier? And maybe that's the first question I want you all to go ask your teams, is what would make our life easier right now? And I'm not talking, easy to the point that we're ineffective, but I'm saying what would make our lives easier, but still allow us to accomplish our job with confidence. And I'll leave it at that. That's my call to action. Go ask that question of your teams. Really think about that answer and press. If everyone says, oh, everything's great, everything's fine, press on alert volume, press on mental health, make sure everyone's all set. There are, and Kevin, this always happens, I always see it. There's at least one organization out there that's perfect right now, meaning everything is just humming along and you've years of investments and growth and development and everything has just built this awesome security team. And right now, your team is set, you're rock solid. Cool. Tomorrow morning, I'd ask myself the same question again, because we want to make sure it is something we're evaluating daily.
Yeah. Okay. Couldn't agree more. It's a great way to wrap. I encourage you, if you have any questions that you didn't want to ask here, connect with me. My email is there. There's also bunch more info on what we do at Vectra.ai. Really tried to keep the product pitch out of this, but in wrapping, you deserve more than vendors have been giving. You deserve better. So demand that of your vendors. Look for signal clarity, not just detections.
Agreed. Awesome. Well, with that said, Kevin, I think we'll hand it back to Mary to close us out for the day. But again, everyone, thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to either of us if you'd like, if there's anything additional follow-up, but hope this has been helpful. Kevin, thank you for letting me join you today. It's been a really, really fun conversation.
Thank you so much, Matt and Kevin, for your great presentation, and to Vectra Networks for sponsoring this webcast, which helps to bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.